Welcome back to another open open session as we talk about containment theory. Again, discussing the emotions topic, discussing the idea about how can we legalize emotions within us and legalize various feelings, including so-called negative feelings. How do we learn how to express, allow to use feelings in our life and use them as resources within our life. I'm going to talk more about the theory called the container or the contained theory. It's a psychological theory brought forth by Wilfred Bion, I think. Mother's guidance is to teach children. It's a mother's kind of, since we are the mother is the first figure who the baby tries to establish attachment to and develop trust as a way to develop trust toward the world. So mother's guidance is to teach children to contain feelings and emotions. Okay, the container and contained theory, Wilfred Bion actually developed it based on the work by Carl Gustav Jung. Let's talk about the theory first. In the mother-child relationship, the mother is a container and the child is a contained. Okay, the baby is not good at emotion. The baby has no idea. It connects. There are emotions coming, but the baby cannot understand it, cannot comprehend it. There is no, of course, conscious connection to the thoughts and the mind work, right? So it's not good at anything that's strange and new. For the developing mind, there is a lot of strange and new. Without having any foundation, the new pattern matches to the unknown. So therefore, according to the theory, death or bad, right? The mother has two types of actions, okay? Something new for the baby. Remember, its connection with the perinatal matrices, stage 2 and stage 3. When the birth started, the baby didn't know how to make sense of it. So it may have association that something new or something strange may necessarily be bad, may bring forth pain, may bring forth uncomfortable. And remember, if baby has various emotions, what we discussed in the previous video, anger, resentment, it can't express it. So baby doesn't know what to do with those emotions. So mother has, there are two types of container actions, okay? The first is to see the pain of the child and present their own emotional strength in the face of it, okay? Kind of say, you know what, now is the time to be happy. And therefore, this is the way to model healthy ways of forming an emotional attachment to experience. It's saying, look, feeding time, we're so happy, right? Explaining that something pleasurable can be happiness, and kind of like connecting various actions throughout the baby's life, throughout the baby's day, to positive emotions, okay? Food is good. Hungry is not necessarily pleasant. Identifying those emotions, identifying those two connections. When I'm eating, I'm happy. When I'm hungry, I'm not happy. Identification is important. The baby will learn to identify. Injury is bad, but laughter is good. The second container, the second type of container would be more like, I see your pain and I'm able to hold your emotions and still be okay. I can see you being sad. I can empathize with you because I'm your mother. It's kind of instinctual, but yet I can be stable. I can hold myself. I can be sad and not die. Remember, die is this extremist situation, extreme, like kind of a reaction to something new and strange, at least in the baby's world, in the baby's way of not fully understanding. There's no gray, there's only black and white, right? I'm either happy or I'm sad. There's no gray, there's no middle. There are no 50 shades of gray, right? I like to say. And it's interesting to know that those are two different ways the mother figure can react when seeing her child express displeasure, express upsetness, sadness, anger also, right? The two containers are also, a lot of therapeutic models have been built upon them, right? And one of them, we talked about it during the transactional analysis, right? I see your pain and I'm okay, right? It's kind of, even though you're not okay, I'm okay, and I can support you in getting okay, right? and it brings further, right? I can copy your pain, I can demonstrate having it, and I can effectively model self-soothing as a mature adult container, right? It's like seeing your baby, your child, when they cannot express, when they're angry about something they didn't get, they throw what? Tantrums. But when you see adults throwing tantrums, right? If they go to the store and they didn't have the dress of your size, do we have adults? Sometimes teenagers do that, right? Adults don't usually throw tantrums. Well, unless some adults who feel very that they're owned, right? They would act like they need to throw tantrums, but they don't throw tantrums, right? Most of them, they say, oh, I'm so sad, I'm mad, I'm angry. But it would be, in a way, the adult mature reaction would be, okay, things happen. I'll buy another dress or I'll buy something else, right? And that's the difference. That's the way to handle things, connecting your mind and your emotions together, figuring out what is the best way to handle the situation in a way where it doesn't disrupt everybody else's emotional kind of environment, right? Because screaming and trying to say, well, you better sew that dress up for me in that size will not get you much, right? So it's interesting to know that this theory, the container and contain theory, also discusses various sensory experiences prior to the conceptualization. And it's interesting to note, right? I see an object, as would be one reaction. Second reaction would be, this object reminds me of my mean friend. That's already perception, thought, right? I see an object is a sensory reaction. I see a marker. What does it involve in me? You guys know what involves me. I want to draw, right? I spent a lot of time recording talking videos, and I'm like, let's draw already, right? But so I want to draw is a secondary reaction sequence, a consequence to seeing the marker, my perception, right? Early childhood is a process of calibrating those states and testing various experiencing, right? That's why we call the two terrible twos, because toddlers tend to tantrum. It's a way of them testing the way how they can, well, kind of control the situation in a way, right? Ultimately, the healthy adults is their own self-sufficient container. Like I mentioned before, there are no dress in your side. You contain yourself, okay? Sometimes it's very upsetting. If it's a dress for a wedding, you will call and you will talk to a friend. I'm so upset, right? You're seeking support of somebody outside. But in general, more or less, you contain yourself, right? So most adults are, well, not most, I would say it's preferable for adults to be self-sufficient containers. And they know how to do both, contain their own emotions and use them when they're needed. Okay, containing yourself, like not splashing out. Okay, a lot of social and friending seems like pairwise containerizing, right? A lot of times you will see a very impulsive friend will be friends with somebody who's more stable, who's more calm, who's a bit more less emotional, right? A friend saying, "You're right, I'm scared too," will create an emotional mirroring validation of a container. Or a friend, somebody who's a coach, or all right, a coach archetype, right, will bravely say, you know, it's okay to be afraid, right? One person, one way to validate somebody to contain is to say, I understand you, I also feel afraid like this. Or another one is saying, not necessarily mirroring, but kind of supporting, providing like a wall to lean on, saying, it's okay to be afraid. It seems unclear how to know which container is right, other than to know already. Okay, it takes time. That's why children take time to get to know their emotions, to act them out, to experiment with them, to know how they can use them in which way. The concept of containment refers to an experience of feeling held and protected, which is what ideally, right, mothers do with babies, both in a physical sense and, of course, in an emotional sense. Psychologists relate this experience back to birth, right? This connection that the mother says, it's okay, go forward. I'm here waiting for you on the other end, right? And it connects this development of a relationship between the mother and the child, bringing forward the attachment we talked about, developing contributing to this development of the trust in the world around you. This concept also refers to acknowledging the emotions of children as they experience it from infant age. The concept of contained and container refers to the acknowledgement of the emotions of the children. For example, as baby infant cries, the mother, while picking up or holding the baby, will verbalize. I mentioned that before, right? Thus, legitimizing or by identifying the emotion experienced by the baby. I know you are upset. You're crying because I will now do what I can to help the situation. And you can be, excuse me, lots of sneezing today. I have a sinus in general. And you can be, you have the right to your emotions. We did say it often during the phrases time, right? You can have the right to your emotions, such as being upset, okay? It's okay to be upset. And this is a perfect example of how the mother is containing the emotion for the child, because the baby doesn't have the capacity to contain. The baby doesn't know how to do it for themselves, right? So the mother or the caregiver models the containing of the emotion, sends the message, I can feel this intensity and not break. It doesn't mean the overwhelming emotion does not bring death. It's not the end of the situation. Let's continue with my life on, right? The opposite actually comes when there are mothers who start panicking, and that brings the other message to the child. Child gets a message that having high emotion is the end of the world. It can lead to something unpleasant. This is the way to express myself. They cannot contain. We know adults like that. They cannot contain themselves. They're very overly emotional. They cannot organize their thought. They cannot organize, they have a hard time with the schedule, right? That's what it is. This is especially, it's interesting to note, children who are especially born with a very strong emotional vector, very, very strong built, right? We talked about it, the 4 vectors, right? We all have 4 vectors where we identify with life, body, emotion, mind, and soul, spirituality. Many of us are born, so all of us are born with 2 strong vectors and then 2 weak ones. One weak one, we have a very successfully can conquer. We work hard, but we conquer it throughout life. We gain kind of control over it. We become successful in it. The second weak vector, that's a challenge. That's a part of our soul mission. This is what we came to work with. We came to work with it, okay? So those of us who have an emotional vector, they're born with a strong emotional vector, they're very much already prone to feeling, right? We call them what? Empathetic, right? Empathetic people. Those people are prone to acknowledging or feeling or actually feeling the emotions as an energy and maybe also bringing it in, okay? It's interesting to note. So they need the most validation of this part so they can use it as their strongest suit to navigate and be successful in the world. Remember, they're born with this as the strongest vector. That means they need to use it as a resource, right? A lot of people of Generation X and older didn't have this modeling in their childhood, right? And emotions were not really identified as a valid form of experience until the 60s and the 70s, right? The hippie revolution really brought it forward, identifying emotions. When a child cries to be fed and for whatever reason, the mother cannot come right away, the child expresses her feelings with a cry. The only possible way of expressing at the infant age. When they don't hear an answer, let's say in this case, by actions actually being taken and fed, right? That's a receipt. That's kind of an answer from the world, right? If they're crying to be picked up and it's not happening, they hear a message from the world that the world doesn't hear you. The world doesn't answer your need. The world, and then the child makes their own perception, interpretations. The world doesn't want me. The world doesn't need me. The world doesn't care for me, whatever that is. If this happens a number of times, depending on the sensitivity level of the child, as well as the perseverance level of the child, those people now, those born in the elements of the tree and the fire, they're more emotional than metal Water can be somewhat emotional. Metal, definitely not emotional. Earth can be emotional, maybe not. It depends. Earth has an easy time balancing them out. That's why the earth can easily balance things out. But tree and fire, most of them, people born within that element, they will come further into the world with an idea that the world will not fulfill their needs. Okay, they tend to internalize whatever happens outside of them. And this is interesting to note. The whole generation of people, I think it's include people like me in the 40s and a bit older, maybe even a bit younger, who were raised on the books by Benjamin Spock, okay? His promise was that babies need to be taught to be self-sufficient by being let cry out. Remember that time? The crying out method, right? Now we know that definitely doesn't work. It's very harmful to the baby. Actually, completely the opposite effect is necessary. Children need to be learned to be self-sufficient. They need to learn to be, rather than being disappointed, the opposite. They need to be giving support, right? When children are given this crying out method, they actually tend to be more sensitive, independent, and become codependent upon the main caregiver figure. So it's important to understand that a certain period, this period that we're dealing with until the age of 1.5, 2, is an important stage to give children the necessary emotional support so that they become so full of it, they get so much of it, that later on, they have enough resources where to draw, and they can draw on the emotional resources as they go forward, as they have different challenges in life, they can deal with it. And of course, the opposite has an opposite effect. Children tend to become clingy. They become more dependent upon the parents, and they're not able to go fully through the separation process later in life when they become teenagers, for example, because at one hand, they become dependent and clingy, but on the other hand, it's like they feel like it's time for me to kind of move on because they understand that all the peers are going through it. They understand. And there's this ambivalence again, the children, they know they're supposed to separate from the parents, but on the other hand, they can't because they didn't get enough resources, emotional connection to the parents, okay, this containment. Okay, they kind of hold on to this memory of the first betrayal, so to say. It's actually the trauma of betrayal, when the parent didn't come when they were first called upon, them, when they were needed as a child. And the children constantly go through this duality, right? They feel betrayed, but they need to constantly connect to the parent because this is the source of resource for at least the first 3 to 5 years of life, okay? Until the children start to rely on the social environment for the resource, they start going to school and all that stuff, okay? That same Benjamin Spock is the one who said you can only feed children every 3 hours. Don't pick them up earlier. Don't give them food earlier. Don't give them food later. This kind of strictness, this kind of structurization of the way people should be eating led to so much eating disorders, of course. This unnecessary need for creating a schedule that instead of soothing children, actually creates an unnecessary message to the children that the world doesn't hear what you need. The world only goes according to their own needs. And that's a wrong message. The children need to hear that the world hears you, the world can answer your needs. This is the message. We're going to actually say those phrases when we're going to draw in the next video, right? The 3 hour creates like this emotional attachment of children to their parents. It created a clinginess, unnecessary, and it kind of backfired, okay? Importance to go with the rhythm of each child, okay? Okay, we're done for today. I am inviting you to, if you're watching this as an open video on YouTube, welcome to join the whole reparenting course. Welcome to join me. It's an amazing, amazing course where we integrate the NeuroGraphic practice with the idea of various stages in the reparenting and bring forth important changes within our life, within the way we react to life. Okay, to register, it's instead of 10, they're at 11 session now. To register, welcome to, oh, did I, right. Welcome to go to my website, NeuroGraphicaUSA.com. And thank you for joining me today. It was a pleasure talking to you and sharing this very interesting information with you.